When you think of online gaming, there are probably a few services that pop up in your head immediately. Maybe a PC service like Steam, or a console service such as PlayStation Network, Xbox Live, or the upcoming Nintendo Switch Online come to mind. Now, keep in mind that although network and online gaming has existed for quite a while, many of these services are relatively recent and didn't become widespread until high-speed internet hit the scene. This is especially true when it comes to console gaming. Perhaps you only learned of network or internet connectivity in consoles when the previously mentioned services became available, and I wouldn't blame you. But it turns out that these modern services included on recent consoles have existed in some form for much longer than many people realize. That brings us to the topic of today's video, where we'll cover a service that offered players a glimpse into the future of video games. In 1984, Japanese satellite TV service WoWow was established. WoWow was one of the very first satellite broadcasting companies. It was known for broadcasting movies, anime, and dubbed television series from other countries. However, WoWow hasn't only worked in television. Using their experience in satellite TV, WoWow decided to branch out and form a subsidiary known as St. Giga. Starting broadcast in 1990, St. Giga would serve as the provider of a satellite radio service, known for being quite different from any other radio service at the time. It would broadcast ambient jazz and electronic music, poetry, and recordings of natural sounds, with a notable lack of interruptions from DJs or ads. This was a well-received combination, but the service and equipment needed to tune in was expensive. In fact, it proved too expensive for most, as many people were struggling in the midst of a recession at the time. This, in turn, led to a period of financial difficulties for St. Giga, starting in 1994. St. Giga was desperately looking for a solution, and fortunately, the solution would approach them. While St. Giga was struggling, it was approached by none other than video game giant Nintendo. Nintendo bought a sizable stake in the company under one condition: a collaboration. That collaboration became what is now known as the BSX Satellaview. BS standing for Broadcast Satellaview, or Satellite, and X standing for either Unknown, Nameless, or possibly Transfer. The Satellaview is an add-on to the Super Famicom, known worldwide as the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. However, the add-on was only sold in Japan. Using the Satellaview, players could log on to the service during a particular window of time to download games, news, and various audio. There were no charges for the downloads themselves, and remember that this was before the internet was as widespread as it is now, especially in gaming, so the concept in and of itself was very much ahead of its time. These downloads could be saved for later, but if a player happened to be playing at the time St. Giga was broadcasting, they could enjoy an additional feature. That feature was SoundLink. This was broadcast quality audio, including voice acting and music, all played while the user enjoyed the game. This, for a 16-bit console, was incredible. Let's take a look at a SoundLink game, BS The Legend of Zelda, The Ancient Stone Tablets. This footage includes the original SoundLink audio.
アジナ様
どうした？
ルフィになる力が消えました。
そうか。敵を倒すと必ずルフィになっていたのが終わったのだな。
はい。それに天気が悪くなります。雨が近いようです。
若者よ、聞こえたか？
The Satellaview even had the appeal of big Nintendo franchises, such as The Legend of Zelda, various Mario spin-offs, Excitebike, F-Zero, Kirby, and more, along with Satellaview's own mascots. One thing that's important to remember is that the Satellaview relied on the aforementioned broadcasting satellite technology, which meant setup was required to utilize the service. This setup wasn't exactly cheap. It could possibly cost the equivalent of $360 to set up, not accounting for the subscription costs. St. Giga hit its peak number of subscribers to the Satellaview service in approximately 1997, with 100,000 subscribers. While this was cause for celebration for St. Giga, Nintendo wasn't quite as impressed. It seemed the Satellaview wasn't enough to keep people interested in the older hardware, especially as newer, more exciting 3D hardware was arriving on the scene. By the late 1990s, Nintendo was beginning to get a bit fed up with St. Giga, and the slow death of the Satellaview. As 2000 approached, Nintendo decided to expedite the death of the Satellaview, putting an end to the delivery of new content from the service, forcing St. Giga to broadcast repeats of older content. Finally, on June 30th, 2000, the Satellaview stopped receiving broadcasts, leaving many games seemingly lost in time. Enter the preservation scene. If there's one thing I've learned on the internet, it's that where there's lost media, there are people who will go to great lengths to preserve it. This also rings true for the Satellaview. Satellaview games were stored on 8 megabit memory packs. These were rewritable, similar to memory cards used for save games on consoles such as the GameCube or PlayStation 2, the difference being that entire games were downloaded to the Satellaview memory packs. The trouble among those attempting to preserve these games lies in the unusual distribution. It can be difficult to track down memory packs with the game still written, as many players would overwrite the cartridges with other games as they ran out of space. Along with this, much of the sound-like audio is simply lost, as the live broadcast nature of these games makes them nearly impossible to preserve. But this doesn't mean that those interested in Satellaview preservation have given up. The Satellaview itself was bundled with a game. Well, not so much a game, but an interactive user interface of sorts, with a title that translates to BSX, the story of the town whose name was stolen. This application is similar to an RPG and consisted of a hub world that users could explore. In this hub world, a user could navigate to buildings that would notify them of Satellaview events, allow them to download games, or spend in-game currency on items they could utilize within the hub world. This was a concept that really wasn't seen at the time, but has appeared in multiplayer games in the years since. This interface caused a few issues with those working to preserve the games, as the hub world could be emulated successfully, but obviously couldn't connect with the satellite service any longer. So what was the solution? Well, fans like LuigiBlood have tried to work around the requirement for the satellite service as a whole, instead attempting to direct the program to download the game from a computer or another data storage solution in the same way. These dedicated fans were able to restore some functionality, but portions of the Satellaview experience simply can't be replicated. However, there are fan translations available for BSX, the story of the town whose name was stolen, and certain Satellaview games can be emulated. These are games that were broadcast for a limited amount of time in the 1990s, which can now be experienced in some form. If it wasn't for the dedication of fans like these, it's possible that these games could have been lost forever. After the demise of the Satellaview, Giga was on the verge of bankruptcy, and ultimately merged with YRB Incorporated. Rebranded as Club Cosmo, broadcast continued until late 2003, followed by its inevitable bankruptcy. Club Cosmo's equipment and tapes containing Giga content were auctioned off, and in spite of a few reruns of Giga audio in the mid-2000s, it was essentially no more. This isn't to say Giga's legacy won't live on. Giga will always be remembered for its unique content and one-of-a-kind collaboration with Nintendo that was perhaps a little bit too innovative for its own good. I believe the Satellaview paved the way for downloadable games in its own way, and delivered games that will continue to be enjoyed for years due to those dedicated to its preservation. Oh, and one more thing. As I was working on this video, Nintendo added 2 additional costumes to the in-game shop in their Nintendo Switch title, Super Mario Odyssey, one of which depicts the spacesuit Mario wears in some Satellaview promotional material. This shows that Nintendo really does respect its history, even the history that isn't familiar to most. Thank you for watching. As always, I appreciate your support. I release videos every Friday, so make sure to check in for more content.